The elevator doors opened on the 42nd floor, and Daniella Vaughn stepped out with her arms full of costume sketches that were threatening to escape her grip at any moment. She had been working as a costume designer for the Metropolitan Opera House for 3 years now, but this particular project had her more stressed than usual. The upcoming production of La Bohème needed 37 costume adjustments by Monday, and it was already Thursday afternoon. Her boss had sent her to deliver the revised sketches to Bennett James, the CEO of James Entertainment Group, who was the primary donor funding this season's productions. She had never met him in person. Most of the costume department dealt with his assistants or the opera house's administrative staff. But today, his office had specifically requested that she bring the sketches herself. Something about wanting to discuss the artistic direction personally. The reception area was all glass and steel, with modern art on the walls that probably cost more than her annual salary. A woman in her 50s with perfectly styled silver hair looked up from behind a sleek desk. "You must be Daniella. Mr. James is expecting you. Go right in." Daniella pushed open the heavy wooden door and found herself in a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The man standing by the window turned around, and she nearly dropped her sketches. Bennett James was younger than she had expected. Mid-30s, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and sharp green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore a charcoal gray suit that was tailored perfectly, and when he moved toward her, there was an easy confidence in his stride that came from someone who had built an empire from the ground up. "Miss Vaughn, thank you for coming." His voice was deep and warm, nothing like the cold corporate tone she had braced herself for. "Of course. I have the revised sketches you wanted to review." She set the portfolio on his desk, trying to ignore how her hands were shaking slightly. This was ridiculous. She had worked with important people before. He opened the portfolio and began studying each sketch with genuine interest. Most donors just signed checks and showed up for opening night photo opportunities. But Bennett was examining every detail, asking thoughtful questions about fabric choices and color symbolism. "This is exceptional work," he said, holding up a sketch of Mimi's Act 4 costume. "The way you have captured her fragility through the deteriorating lace here. It tells the story without a single word." Daniella felt warmth spreading through her chest. That was exactly what I was going for. Most people do not notice those details. Then most people are not paying attention. He looked up at her, and their eyes met for a moment that stretched longer than it should have. "Have you been to opening night of any productions you have worked on?" "A few times. Usually I am backstage making last-minute adjustments." "That is a shame. You should experience your work from the audience perspective." He closed the portfolio and leaned against his desk. "Actually, I have an extra ticket to tomorrow night's performance of Carmen. Would you like to join me?" The question caught her completely off guard. "That is very generous, but I could not." "Why not?" She fumbled for a reasonable excuse. The truth was that she was terrified. This man was way out of her league. He probably had models and actresses on speed dial. "I do not want to impose on your evening." "You would not be imposing." "I am asking you." His expression was open, sincere. "Besides, I would appreciate having someone there who can explain the costume choices. I admit my knowledge of opera is more financial than artistic." That made her laugh despite her nerves. "So I would be your translator," something like that. She should say no. This was definitely not a good idea. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, "Okay, yes, thank you." His smile transformed his entire face, making him look younger and less intimidating. "Good. I will have a car pick you up at 6:30. Daniella left his office in a daze. She had just agreed to go to the opera with one of the wealthiest men in the city. This was not a date, she reminded herself. This was networking, professional development, absolutely nothing to panic about. She panicked anyway. The next evening, she stood in front of her closet staring at her limited selection of formal wear. Everything looked wrong. Too casual, too flashy, too boring. Finally, she settled on a simple navy blue dress that her friend Maria had convinced her to buy last year for a wedding. She paired it with her grandmother's pearl earrings and hoped she looked sophisticated rather than like she was trying too hard. The car arrived exactly at 6:30. It was not a limousine, thank God, just a sleek black sedan with a professional driver who held the door open for her. The drive to the opera house took 20 minutes, and her stomach did nervous flips the entire time. Bennett was waiting in the lobby, and her breath caught when she saw him. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo, and she was suddenly very aware that she was drastically underdressed. But when he saw her, his face lit up. "You look beautiful," he said, and the way he said it made her believe he meant it. "Thank you. You look very nice, too." Nice was an understatement. He looked like he had stepped out of a magazine spread. He offered her his arm, and they made their way through the crowded lobby. People kept stopping him, shaking his hand, thanking him for his support of the arts. He was gracious with everyone, but kept the conversations brief, as if he did not want to waste time on pleasantries when they could be doing something else. Their seats were in a private box with a perfect view of the stage. Daniella had worked at the opera house for 3 years and had never sat in a seat this good. Usually she watched from the back of the upper balcony on her break if she watched at all. "This is incredible," she whispered as she settled into the plush velvet chair. "Wait until the performance starts." He was watching her face, not the stage, and something about the intensity of his gaze made her skin warm. The lights dimmed, and the orchestra began the overture. Daniella had heard Carmen perform dozens of times, had worked on costume repairs during rehearsals, but experiencing it from this perspective was completely different. The music swelled around them, the stage came alive with color and movement, and she found herself leaning forward, completely absorbed. She had forgotten that Bennett was beside her until she glanced over during the habanera and found him still looking at her. Not at the stage, at her. "You are missing the performance," she whispered. "No, I am not," he whispered back, and the way he said it made her heart skip. She forced herself to focus on the stage, but she was acutely aware of him now. The way his shoulder was inches from hers, the subtle scent of his cologne, the sound of his breathing. During intermission, he ordered champagne and they stood at the railing of the box, looking down at the crowd below. "So what do you think so far?" she asked. "Is Carmen living up to your expectations?" "It is exceeding them." He was still looking at her instead of the crowd. "Tell me something. Why did you become a costume designer?" The question surprised her. People usually asked about her work, not her motivations. "My grandmother was a seamstress. She immigrated from Italy when she was 20, could barely speak English, but she could make anything with fabric and thread. She taught me when I was little. I loved how you could transform someone completely with the right costume, make them feel powerful or vulnerable or magical. That is a beautiful reason." He set down his champagne glass. "My father wanted me to go into finance like him, said entertainment was frivolous, but I always believed that art matters, that stories matter, that the things that make us feel something are the most important things we can invest in." "Is that why you donate to the opera?" "Partly. Also because my mother loved opera. She died when I was 15, and one of my last memories of her is watching her get ready for a performance. She was so excited, so alive. I want other people to have that experience, to feel that joy." Daniella felt something shift in her chest. This was not the superficial wealthy donor she had imagined. This was someone who understood loss and beauty and the importance of preserving both. "I am sorry about your mother," she said softly. "Thank you." He turned to face her fully. "Tell me more about your grandmother. Is she still in Italy?" "She passed away 2 years ago, but she got to see my first professional production before she died. She cried through the entire thing, said I had made her proud." Daniella smiled at the memory, even though it hurt. "She always told me that if you make something beautiful, you leave a piece of your soul in the world. I try to remember that when I am stressed about deadlines and budget constraints." She sounds like she was an amazing woman. "She was the best person I have ever known." The lights flickered, signaling the end of intermission. They returned to their seats, and this time when the performance resumed, Daniella caught Bennett watching her several more times. But she also noticed him watching the stage now, really watching it, leaning forward during the card scene with genuine engagement. When the final tragic notes faded and the curtain fell, the audience erupted in applause. Daniella stood with everyone else, clapping until her hands hurt. She had seen this opera so many times, but tonight it had felt new, special. "First time at the opera," she whispered, then realized what she had said. "I mean, my first time experiencing it like this, from this perspective." Bennett was standing very close to her, his hand resting on the back of her chair. "I spent the whole show watching your face light up. It was better than anything happening on stage." Her breath caught. The way he was looking at her now, there was no mistaking it. This was not just professional courtesy. This was something else entirely. "We should probably." She gestured vaguely toward the exit, suddenly needing air and space to think. "Right, of course." But he did not move away. "Daniella, would you like to get dinner with me? There is a restaurant around the corner that stays open late." She knew she should say no. This was moving too fast. He was too wealthy, too important, too everything. But the word that came out was, yes. The restaurant was small and intimate, the kind of place that did not need to advertise because the right people already knew about it. The host greeted Bennett by name and led them to a quiet corner table. Over pasta and wine, they talked about everything. His childhood in Boston, her years studying at Parsons, his struggles taking over his father's company and transforming it from a stuffy investment firm into an entertainment powerhouse, her anxiety about never feeling good enough in the competitive world of theater arts. "I always feel like I am one mistake away from losing everything," she admitted. "Like someone is going to realize I do not actually know what I am doing and send me back to working retail." "Imposter syndrome," Bennett said. "I felt the same way for years. Sometimes I still do. I will be in a board meeting and think, who let me be in charge? I am just making this up as I go. But you built an empire. You clearly know what you are doing. And you dress opera singers in costumes that tell stories and make audiences cry. You clearly know what you are doing too." He reached across the table and took her hand. His fingers were warm and strong, and the touch sent electricity up her arm. "Sometimes we need other people to remind us of our own worth." She looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. This was crazy. She had known this man for exactly 24 hours, but sitting here with him felt more natural than anything she had experienced in years. "Can I be honest with you?" she asked. "Please. This terrifies me. You terrify me, not in a bad way, but in a too good way. Like this cannot possibly be real." "I know exactly what you mean." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "I did not expect this either, but I have learned that the best things in life are usually the ones you do not see coming." They stayed at the restaurant until it closed, talking until the staff started putting chairs up on tables. The drive back to her apartment in Brooklyn felt too short. When they pulled up outside her building, Bennett walked her to the door. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "It was perfect," he finished. "I was going to say surreal, but perfect works too." He smiled, and she realized she was quickly becoming addicted to that smile. "Can I see you again? Maybe somewhere less formal, just us, no opera house or fancy restaurants." "I would really like that. Tomorrow. I know a great place for brunch in the village." "Tomorrow is Saturday. Do you not have important CEO things to do?" "Nothing more important than this." He leaned in slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, but she did not want to pull away. When his lips touched hers, soft and questioning, she felt like every romance novel she had ever secretly read suddenly made sense. This was what those authors had been trying to describe. This overwhelming rightness. When they pulled apart, she was breathless. "Tomorrow," she agreed. She floated up the stairs to her apartment and found her roommate Maria waiting up on the couch. "Tell me everything," Maria demanded, "and do not leave out a single detail." Daniella collapsed next to her and did exactly that. The next few weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and late-night conversations. Bennett picked her up after work in casual clothes, jeans and a sweater that somehow looked just as good as his tailored suits. They went to hole-in-the-wall diners and walked through Central Park and browsed bookstores in the village. He never acted like his wealth made him special, never name-dropped or flashed his credit card to impress her. She learned that he was funny, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard. That he was intensely loyal to the small circle of people he trusted. That he had a terrible singing voice but loved music anyway. That he slept with 2 pillows and took his coffee black, and had a scar on his left forearm from a childhood bike accident. He learned that she was terrible at directions and could get lost in a straight hallway. That she talked to herself when she was concentrating. That she had a weakness for terrible reality TV shows and good red wine. That she was afraid of heights but loved thunderstorms. They had not slept together yet, though the tension was building every time they kissed goodnight. Daniella appreciated that he was not rushing her, that he seemed content to take things slow. But slow was becoming increasingly difficult when every fiber of her being wanted to drag him upstairs and forget about propriety. 3 weeks after their first date, he invited her to his apartment for dinner. He was going to cook, he said, and she was not allowed to help because he wanted to impress her. His apartment was a penthouse in Tribeca with views that made her dizzy. But it was also surprisingly warm and lived in. Bookshelves lined with well-worn novels, a guitar in the corner, photos of family and friends on the mantel. "This is not what I expected," she said, examining a framed picture of a younger Bennett with a woman who had his eyes. "What did you expect? A cold marble palace, maybe." She smiled at him over her shoulder. "This is better. It actually feels like you." He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "That is my mom. This was taken about 6 months before she died. We were at her sister's wedding. You look happy." I was. She was in remission at that point. "We thought we had more time." His voice was quiet against her hair. "I keep that picture there to remind myself that even when things are hard, there are always good moments worth holding on to." She turned in his arms and kissed him, trying to pour everything she was feeling into it. He responded immediately, deepening the kiss until they were both breathing hard. "Dinner is going to burn," he murmured against her lips. "I do not care. I spent 3 hours preparing it." That made her laugh. "Okay, fine. Feed me first." Dinner was surprisingly good. Homemade pasta with a cream sauce, salad with strawberries and candied pecans, and chocolate soufflé for dessert that had clearly been purchased from a bakery, despite his claims of making it himself. "I never said I made the dessert," he protested when she called him out on it. "I said I made dinner. Dessert is its own category." Such a lawyer answer. Wait, are you a lawyer? I have a law degree, but I never practiced. Went straight into business after graduation. He refilled her wine glass. My father insisted I needed to understand contracts and liability. Turns out he was right. After dinner, they moved to the couch. The city lights sparkled below them and soft music played from hidden speakers. Bennett pulled her against his side and she rested her head on his shoulder. Can I tell you something? He asked. Anything? I have not felt this way about someone in a very long time, maybe ever. His hand was playing with her hair absently. It scares me how much I already care about you. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could feel it. I care about you too, so much that it keeps me awake at night. Good. I would hate to be the only one losing sleep. He tilted her chin up so she was looking at him. Stay tonight, please. Just sleep, we do not have to. Yes, she interrupted. I want to stay, and we do not have to just sleep. The look in his eyes made her stomach flip. Are you sure? I have never been more sure of anything. He kissed her then, slow and deep, and she felt the last of her reservations melt away. This was right. He was right. Whatever happened next, she wanted this moment with him. Later, lying in his bed with the sheets tangled around them and the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling, Daniella felt a sense of peace she had not experienced in years. Bennett was tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder, and she could feel his heartbeat against her back. What are you thinking about? He asked. How scared I am. His hand stilled. Scared of how perfect this feels, of how easy it would be to fall completely in love with you. She turned to face him. Of how much it would hurt if this ended. He cupped her face in his hands. Then let us make sure it does not end. Let us choose this, choose us every single day. You make it sound so simple. Maybe it is. Maybe we complicate things because we are afraid of being happy. He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips. I am choosing you, Daniella Vaughn. I chose you the moment you walked into my office with your sketches falling everywhere and your nervous smile. I will keep choosing you for as long as you will let me. Tears pricked her eyes. I choose you too. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and for the first time in months, Daniella slept without anxiety twisting in her chest. The next morning, she woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. She found one of Bennett's shirts and padded out to the kitchen, where he was standing at the stove in sweatpants and nothing else. Good morning, beautiful. He poured her a cup of coffee, already prepared the way she liked it with cream and 2 sugars. You remembered how I take my coffee. I remember everything about you. He slid a plate of eggs and bacon in front of her. Eat, you need your strength. Oh, planning to tire me out again, the grin he gave her was absolutely wicked. Eventually, but first, I have something to show you. After breakfast, he drove them out of the city. Daniella watched the buildings give way to trees and suburbs, curiosity building with every mile. Are you kidnapping me? Should I be concerned? Too late to worry about that now, he teased. Besides, you came willingly. They ended up at a sprawling estate in Connecticut. The house was beautiful, old stone covered in ivy with gardens that probably looked incredible in spring. What is this place? She asked as they walked up to the front door. My grandmother's house. Well, mine now, technically. She left it to me when she passed last year. He unlocked the door and led her inside. The furniture was covered in white sheets, and dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through tall windows. I have not decided what to do with it yet. Part of me wants to sell it, but another part cannot let go. Daniella walked through the rooms, imagining what they must have looked like full of life. It is beautiful. Why would you sell it? It feels too big for one person, too full of memories. He pulled a sheet off what turned out to be a grand piano. My grandmother used to play. She would have concerts here every summer, invite everyone she knew. The house would be full of music and laughter. That sounds magical. It was. He sat down at the piano bench and played a few notes. I have been thinking about turning it into something. A retreat for artists maybe, or a music school. Something that would honor what she loved about this place. Daniella sat beside him on the bench. I think that is a wonderful idea. Would you help me? Not the business side, I have people for that. But the vision, the soul of it. I want it to feel welcoming and inspiring, not sterile and institutional. You want my help, I want your partnership. He took her hand. In this and maybe in everything else. It was too soon to be having this conversation. They had known each other less than 2 months, but somehow it did not feel rushed. It felt inevitable. Okay, she said simply. Over the next few months, they threw themselves into the project. Daniella brought Maria and some other designer friends to help envision the space. They decided on a music and arts retreat, with studios for composers, practice rooms for musicians, and workshops for costume and set designers. A place where creativity could flourish without the pressure of commercial success. Bennett watched Daniella come alive as she planned the spaces, choosing paint colors and fabrics and furniture. She was in her element, and he fell more in love with her every single day, but it was not all perfect. The more serious things got between them, the more his world started to intrude. There were charity galas where she felt out of place among the society crowd. Business dinners where she sat silent while people discussed mergers and acquisitions. Photographers catching them together, and suddenly her face was in gossip columns being scrutinized by strangers. I do not know if I can do this, she told Maria one night after a particularly brutal gala where several women had looked at her like she was something Bennett had scraped off his shoe. I do not belong in that world. Does he make you happy? Maria asked. Yes, incredibly happy. Then the rest is just noise. Who cares what those superficial people think? But Daniella did care. She hated feeling inadequate, hated the whispers that followed them, hated seeing her name paired with phrases like gold digger and social climber. Things came to a head at a fundraiser for the Opera House. It was a major event, black tie and 500 guests, and as the primary donor Bennett was expected to give a speech. Daniella wore a dress she had designed herself, a deep emerald green that made her feel beautiful and confident, until she overheard 2 women in the bathroom. Did you see who Bennett James brought? His little costume girl. I know. It is so embarrassing. She is pretty enough, I suppose, but completely out of her depth. Give it another month and he will be back to dating appropriately. Daniella locked herself in a stall and tried to breathe through the hurt. She knew she should not let strangers' opinions matter, but the words burrowed under her skin anyway. When she finally emerged, Bennett was waiting outside the bathroom looking worried. There you are. I have been looking everywhere. They are about to start dinner. He took one look at her face and frowned. What happened? Nothing, I am fine, Daniella. He pulled her into a quiet corner. Talk to me. Everything came spilling out. The overheard conversation, her insecurities, her fear that she would never be good enough for his world. Stop, he said firmly when she finally ran out of words. Just stop. Do you think I care what any of those people think? Do you think their opinions matter to me at all? They are your peers. Your social circle. They are acquaintances at best. You know who matters. You, your opinion, your happiness. He took both her hands. I love you, Daniella. I have loved you since that first night at the opera when you whispered that it was your first time experiencing it like that, and your whole face was glowing with joy. I do not want someone who fits into my world. I want someone who makes my world worth living in. That is you. It was the first time either of them had said those words. She felt them sink into her chest, settling somewhere deep and permanent. I love you too, she whispered. "I am sorry I let them get into my head. Do not apologize, just promise me you will remember who you are. You are brilliant and talented and beautiful, and anyone who cannot see that is not worth your time." He kissed her softly. "Now let us go back in there and show them exactly how much I adore you." They walked back into the ballroom hand in hand. During his speech, Bennett thanked the usual donors and sponsors, but then he went off script. "There is someone here tonight who reminds me why we do this, why we fight to keep the arts alive and accessible. Her name is Daniella Vaughn, and she is the most talented costume designer I have ever had the privilege of knowing. But more than that, she is the kindest, most passionate person I have ever met. She understands that art is not just about beauty for beauty's sake. It is about telling stories that matter, about creating moments of transcendence in our ordinary lives. Everything I do, every dollar I donate, every project I support, is because I want to live in a world where people like Daniella can thrive and create and inspire others. So thank you, Daniella, for reminding me what is important." The room erupted in applause. Daniella felt her face burning, but this time it was with pride instead of shame. Bennett caught her eye across the room and winked, and she fell in love with him all over again. After that night, things shifted. Daniella stopped trying to fit into his world and simply existed in it as herself. Some people still looked down on her, but most were kind once they got past their initial assumptions. And Bennett never left her side, making it clear through both words and actions that she was his priority. The arts retreat opened 6 months later. They called it the Haven, and the opening weekend was everything they had hoped for. Musicians and designers and writers filled the old house with creativity and laughter, exactly as Bennett's grandmother would have wanted. Daniella stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Bennett came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "We did it," he said. "You did it. This was your vision. No, this was ours. I had the money and the building, but you gave it soul." He turned her to face him, and she saw something nervous in his expression. "Actually, there is something I wanted to ask you. Something I have been planning for weeks." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Daniella's heart stopped. "Daniella Vaughn, from the moment I met you, my life has been better in every possible way. You challenge me and inspire me and make me want to be the best version of myself. I cannot imagine my future without you in it." He opened the box to reveal a stunning ring, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. "Will you marry me?" She was crying before she even realized it, happy tears streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her, deep and thorough, and somewhere in the house behind them people started cheering. Daniella laughed against his mouth, realizing their friends had been watching from the windows. Maria burst out onto the porch followed by half a dozen others. "I knew it. I told you all he was going to propose this weekend." "You knew?" Daniella looked at Bennett accusingly. "I had to ask someone for ring advice. Maria has good taste." He kept his arm around her waist possessively, as if he was afraid she might disappear. "Besides, she threatened to hurt me if I did not do it right." "I like her," Maria said to Bennett. "You can keep her." The rest of the evening was a blur of congratulations and champagne. Someone found a bottle of expensive scotch that had been hidden in Bennett's grandmother's study, and they toasted to love and art and new beginnings. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Daniella and Bennett walked through the gardens in the moonlight. "Are you happy?" he asked, deliriously. She held up her hand, watching the ring catch the light. "I keep thinking I am going to wake up and this will all be a dream." "If it is, we are having the same dream." He stopped walking and pulled her close. I meant what I said earlier. You make everything better, brighter, more meaningful. You do the same for me." She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I was so scared when I met you. Scared of not being enough, of getting hurt, of wanting something I could not have. But you made it safe to be scared, to be vulnerable, to fall. We both fell." He kissed the top of her head. "And I plan to keep falling for the rest of my life." They got married in the garden at the Haven on a perfect spring morning. Daniella wore a dress she had designed herself, ivory lace with delicate beading that caught the sunlight. Bennett wore a tuxedo and cried when she walked down the aisle, not even trying to hide his tears. The ceremony was small and intimate, just close friends and family. Maria was her maid of honor and made a speech that had everyone laughing and crying in equal measure. Bennett's best man, his childhood friend Robert, told embarrassing stories about teenage Bennett that made Daniella love her husband even more. They danced under string lights as the sun set, surrounded by people who loved them. At one point, Bennett pulled her close and whispered, "Remember that first night at the opera? How could I forget? I knew then that you were going to change my life. I just did not know how much." He spun her under his arm and pulled her back against his chest. "Best decision I ever made, asking you to that performance. Best decision I ever made was saying yes." They spent their honeymoon in Italy, visiting the small village where Daniella's grandmother had grown up. Walking the same streets she had walked, seeing the church where she was baptized, meeting distant relatives who welcomed them with open arms and endless pasta. "I wish she could have met you," Daniella said one evening as they sat overlooking the Mediterranean. "She would have loved you." "I wish I could have met her too. Thank her for teaching you to see beauty in fabric and thread, for giving you the tools to create magic." Daniella leaned against his shoulder, feeling profoundly grateful for the path that had led her here. For the job that had sent her to his office, for the courage to say yes to that first date, for the love that had grown between them like something inevitable and right. A year later, they were back at the Haven for their anniversary. The retreat had become even more successful than they had imagined, with waiting lists for every session and artists creating work that was being recognized internationally. "I have something to tell you," Daniella said over dinner. Bennett looked up from his pasta, immediately attentive. "Is everything okay? Better than okay?" She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." The fork dropped from his other hand, clattering against the plate. "Are you serious? Completely serious? I found out this morning I am about 8 weeks along." He was around the table in an instant, pulling her up and spinning her around before remembering he should probably be gentle. Sorry, can I still do that? Is spinning allowed?" She laughed, giddy with joy at his reaction. "Spinning is allowed. I am pregnant, not made of glass." "We are having a baby." He said it like he was testing the words. Then louder, "We are having a baby." "The whole house does not need to know," she said, but she was laughing too hard to be serious. But it was too late. Maria came running from the kitchen where she had been helping prep dessert. "Did I just hear what I think I heard?" And then it was chaos again, everyone celebrating and crying and planning. Bennett never let go of her hand through all of it, squeezing her fingers every few minutes as if to reassure himself this was real. That night, lying in bed with his hand on her stomach, he asked, "Are you scared, terrified, but also so excited I can barely stand it?" She covered his hand with hers. "We are going to be parents. You are going to be an amazing mother, patient and creative and full of love. You are going to be an amazing father. I have seen you with your nieces and nephews. They adore you. I hope our kid inherits your talent and your heart. I hope they inherit your integrity and your terrible jokes." He gasped in mock offense. "My jokes are excellent." "Your jokes are awful, and I love them anyway." He kissed her then, soft and reverent, and she felt the future stretching out before them, full of possibility and promise. Their daughter was born on a snowy December evening, 7 pounds and 6 ounces of perfect. They named her Grace, after Bennett's mother, with the middle name Rosa after Daniella's grandmother. Bennett held her for the first time and broke down completely, tears streaming down his face as he looked at the tiny person in his arms. "Hi, Grace," he whispered. "I am your dad. I have been waiting my whole life to meet you." Daniella watched them from her hospital bed, exhausted and sore and happier than she had ever been. This was her family, her husband and her daughter, the life she had built from courage and love and the willingness to take a chance. When Grace was 6 months old, they brought her to the opera for the first time. She slept through most of it, bundled in a carrier against Bennett's chest, but she woke up during the final act and watched the stage with wide, curious eyes. "First time at the opera," Daniella whispered to Bennett. He looked at her and smiled, remembering. "I spent that whole show watching your face light up, and now we get to watch hers light up, at this and everything else." They had 2 more children over the next 5 years. A son named Daniel, who had his father's green eyes and his mother's artistic soul. And another daughter, Lily, who was pure chaos and joy from the moment she could walk. The Haven continued to thrive, and Daniella eventually left her job at the Opera House to run the retreat full-time. She still designed costumes occasionally, for special productions that caught her interest, but her real passion became mentoring young designers and creating a space where artists could grow. Bennett scaled back his corporate responsibilities, promoting someone else to CEO so he could focus on the philanthropic side of the business. He and Daniella became known as major supporters of arts education, funding scholarships and programs for underprivileged students. On their 10th anniversary, they returned to the Metropolitan Opera House for another performance of Carmen. The same production they had seen on their first date, revived for a special anniversary season. They sat in the same private box, and Daniella felt time collapse in on itself. She was 27 again, nervous and overwhelmed by the handsome CEO beside her. But she was also 37, confident and deeply in love with the husband who still made her heart race. "What are you thinking about?" Bennett asked, catching her staring at him instead of the stage. "About how much has changed, how much has stayed the same. I still spend half the performance watching you instead of the stage. I noticed some things never change. I do not want them to. I love watching you experience things. Seeing the world through your eyes makes everything more beautiful." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night, about choosing each other every day?" "I meant every word." "I know. And I have chosen you every single day since then. Even on the hard days, especially on the hard days, I choose you." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for making it easy to keep choosing. Thank you for changing my life, for being my partner and my love and the mother of my children. For making me better than I ever thought I could be." He kissed her temple. "Here is to the next 10 years, and the 10 after that, and every day after that." The music swelled around them, the familiar notes of Carmen's fate playing out on stage, but Daniella was not watching the performance. She was watching Bennett's profile in the dim light, memorizing the curve of his jaw and the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. She thought about that first night, when she had been so scared and uncertain, when she had almost said no to his invitation. How different her life would be if she had let fear win, but she had taken the chance. She had walked into that opera house and let herself feel the magic. She had let herself fall in love with a man who saw her worth before she even saw it herself. And now, 10 years and 3 children and countless memories later, she was still falling. Still discovering new depths to love, new reasons to wake up grateful, the opera ended. The audience applauded. And Daniella and Bennett sat in their private box, hands intertwined, watching their story continue to unfold. Outside the opera house, snow had started to fall. They walked through it hand in hand, not rushing, savoring the quiet moment together before returning to their loud, chaotic, beautiful family life. "Same time next year?" Bennett asked as they reached their car. "Same time next year," Daniella agreed, "and every year after that." He opened the car door for her, ever the gentleman, and she slid inside. As they drove through the snowy city streets toward home, toward their children and their life together, Daniella thought about all the moments that had led them here. A portfolio of sketches, an invitation to the opera, a whispered confession about it being her first time experiencing something magical. And Bennett, choosing to watch her face instead of the stage, falling in love with her wonder and joy. Sometimes the best love stories started with a single choice, a moment of courage, a willingness to say yes to possibility. Their story had started at the opera, but it had grown into something bigger than either of them could have imagined. A marriage, a family, a shared purpose. A life built on partnership and respect, and the kind of love that made everything else fade into background noise. Grace was waiting up when they got home, even though it was past her bedtime. She had convinced the babysitter to let her stay awake just a little longer. "How was the opera?" she asked, climbing into Bennett's arms. "Magical," Daniella said, helping Daniel and Lily out of their coats. "Just like always. Tell me the story again, about how Daddy asked you out for the first time." It was Grace's favorite story. She had heard it dozens of times but never got tired of asking for it again. Bennett settled onto the couch with Grace in his lap, while the other two children arranged themselves around their parents. "Well, your mother came to my office with these drawings." Daniella listened to him tell the story, adding details and corrections when he embellished too much. The kids listened with rapt attention, even though they knew every word. When the story was finished and the children were finally in bed, Daniella and Bennett stood in the doorway of their bedroom looking at each other. 10 years, she said. Best 10 years of my life." He pulled her close and she breathed in the familiar scent of him. Home, safety, love. "Mine too." They had chosen each other that first night, and they had kept choosing each other every day since. Through joy and struggle, through the mundane and the magnificent, through every ordinary moment that made up a life. And they would keep choosing each other, Daniella knew. For all the years ahead. For every anniversary and opera performance. For every bedtime story and family dinner. For every quiet moment and grand adventure. It had started with an invitation to the opera. With her whispered confession that it was her first time, and his admission that he had spent the whole show watching her face light up. But it had become something lasting, something true. Something that would carry them through all the years ahead, hand in hand, still discovering new ways to fall in love. Outside their window, the snow continued to fall over the city. Inside, wrapped in Bennett's arms, Daniella felt the certainty of their love settle over her like a warm blanket. This was home. This was family. This was the life she had built from a single moment of courage, and it was more beautiful than any opera, any costume, any artistic creation could ever be. It was real. It was theirs, and it was just beginning.